So this is just a very brief thank you and introduction before Barbara speaks. Barbara, thank you so much for being here today to help us understand what is this bill that New York State has recently introduced to incentivize you all, us all, to farm in climate-friendly ways. The originator of the bill is Dee Dee Barrett in the Hudson Valley area. Barbara is our local Assemblywoman, and she is here to tell you more about the bill and take any of your questions.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. I threw some notes together in the last couple days. I've had a couple crazy weeks. I've introduced like 4 or 5 of my own bills over the last couple weeks. And then folks decided they want to have a steering committee next week, and I'm chair of the steering committee, so I had a lot on my plate. But, and normally I don't go out speaking publicly about things that I know almost nothing about, but I thought I'd make an exception in this case for all of you to get some information, and for Miranda, who's been doing great work in lots of environmental work, and to whom I can't imagine saying no at an invitation to come out and speak. Assemblywoman Dee Dee Barrett from the Hudson Valley, Dutchess County, I think is her home, introduced this bill, and is sorry she couldn't be here. But I will not be like the member of the British Parliament about whom someone wrote, he stood up to speak, he had nothing to say, but unfortunately he said it at great length. I'm going to be brief. But also it's not totally true that I don't know anything at all about carbon sequestration or sometimes called no-till farming, and there are other iterations of that. But some of you know that I was trying to figure out the dates the other day. When did we get the moratorium on fracking? When did the, sort of between the end of all the 6 years of work we did, was one of the leaders in that legislative work on stopping fracking in New York, and the time when we actually got a decision from the Department of Health to put a de facto ban in place. We had a lull, and I was sort of sitting around very frustrated that the state wasn't doing enough, that certainly DC wasn't doing enough. Were we going to get a good agreement in Paris and all of that kind of thing? We weren't doing enough out of Copenhagen. And so I was sitting around a little frustrated, and I happened upon the book by Mark Hertzgaard, the environmental reporter for The Nation, called Hot, Living Through the Next 50 Years on Earth. And I was, picked it up, bought it, and took it home and started reading it. And I happened to know Mark a little bit. He had been a good friend of my brother's. They both went to Johns Hopkins together, undergrad. And both were government and history majors, and they both interned on campus. They drove back and forth from Towson, Maryland, the Goucher campus where they both lived, because Hopkins didn't have enough dorm space. And so they commuted back and forth every day for the semester to intern on Capitol Hill and got to be very good friends. So I knew Mark a little bit, I'd met him, and I had followed his work over the years. I'd read his earlier book called Earth Odyssey, where he went all over the world, demonstrating, very descriptively describing environmental problems around the world. So I'm sitting there, I see Mark's book, Hot, Living Through the Next 50 Years on Earth, which was certainly a provocative title. And I thought, well, maybe I could call Mark and see if he might want to come in here, and maybe we could all get together and do a conference here on climate change. So I emailed Mark and said, sure, I'd love to come. And I got a group of stakeholders together. I said, we want everyone in the community together. Got about 20 people around the table, environmentalists, Cornell, the Chamber of Commerce, Sustainable Tompkins. This was mostly Tompkins County, but Portland too. I also represent Portland County. We brought in the sustainability people and academics from Portland County. And we spent the next 6 months. We passed all the work off to the wonderful Gay Nicholson at Sustainable Tompkins, threw most of the work off to her, paid her for her work. We raised money, went to the insurance companies to raise money, and that's something I learned from Mark's book, that it's the insurance companies who, more than anyone, besides the academics, besides the scientists, understand the threat of climate change. They're seeing the damages pile up, and they're simply making decisions not to insure things, you know, right? We've got the flood issue on the coast and all of that. And I think the federal government is not forever going to keep rebuilding homes close to the ocean and other places probably. Anyway, so Mark agreed And we brought him in. We had a great conference. Had the honor of meeting, and Johannes we had a cameo in Mark's book. He talked quite a bit about it seems like a quarter of his book was on agriculture and no-till farming, and he mentioned the work of Johannes, and I'm like, oh, I didn't realize I should have realized, I should have known Cornell would have some of our world's experts in some of these areas. So I was very pleased when Mark came in, and part of it was going up to Cornell with him and meeting the scientists there and talking to them about these issues. But I have been saying for quite a while, I'd like to see what's actually happening out in the field on this matter. So I'm really glad to be here. I also, when I told Dee Dee Barrett I'd be happy to step in for her, she and her staff put together some notes on the bill that she's introduced. So let me just read what I'll just read her remarks, okay? It's a little backwards here. So my colleague has been doing great work here on the issue of carbon farming. I was very glad. I've been working on trying to just stop the fossil fuel build out in New York. No more major pipelines, all these big pipelines they're building. No more compressor stations, no more power plants with natural gas. To me, it makes no sense that we ban fracking in New York. We say we know what, not only the potential damage to water and air is, lots of damage. I know at least one person here from Pennsylvania that can attest to all the continuing water damage in Pennsylvania. So not only was there that, but it's always dangerous to digress. So we not only had that problem, but as time went along, we had the research from Dr. Howarth at Cornell, Bob Howarth, about what methane was doing, how powerful methane was as a greenhouse gas, and how much was going in the atmosphere, what a danger that was, and what a contributor it is to climate change. So, you know, as we started building all these pipelines and so on, it was like, it's crazy that we banned fracking in New York, but we're going to continue to encourage, by having these huge pipelines through New York, we're encouraging fracking in Pennsylvania and West Virginia and so on. And the methane that goes up in Pennsylvania, the fugitive methane from drilling and transmission anywhere else, goes up into the atmosphere that affects all of us. So there are no political boundaries in terms of these issues. So while I've been busy with that, Dee Dee very smartly came in. I was very glad to see her put in this bill that would allow for a tax credit on carbon sequestration for farmers. Now, legislative bills tend to be very general. You know, we want to have, it just says, you know, we'll have ag and markets. It's actually asked DEC to do, figure out what the, look at the methods used and figure out an appropriate amount for the amount of carbon that would get sequestered in something like no-till farming or biochar sequestration, and then basically have a carbon price, and rather than thinking of it as a tax, you would actually pay the farmer for the amount of carbon that they were going to sequester using the methods that they use. So I was very pleased to see it. I very quickly got on the bill as a co-sponsor. It's an Assembly One House bill so far. There's no Senate sponsor, no companion bill, I should say, of companion bill, what we call a same as, exact same language. I don't think there's any even similar bill yet in the Senate. And of course you need that to get law. But it was great that Dee Dee put this out. It's the first bill of its kind in the country to provide financial incentives for farmers for these climate smart farming practices. But sometimes, you know, people say, what's the point in one house bills? You don't have a companion bill in the Senate. It's not going to become law soon. Why put out a one house bill? Well, first of all, it gets the discussion going, as we're seeing here. It helps focus discussion on something. It helps start getting feedback on how it might work and what works for people out in the field. And also, it became a matter in the budget. We do the budget from January to the end of March. And Dee Dee Barrett, my colleague, and I'm sure the leadership in our house, Steve Engelbright at NCON, has been a wonderful on these issues, a very strong environmentalist, very keyed into the climate change issue. And they pushed to get not the bill done in the budget, but a study bill done. Put $50,000 in the state budget that will eventually, I don't know quite where it stands right now, if the agency takes that, puts out, I presume, an RFP, a request for proposals, that people would then apply for that state money to do a study. I don't think it designates, I'm sorry, it's not my bill, so I haven't followed every inch of it. But I don't believe it. Sometimes we say Cornell will do this study, but usually it's put out as an RFP, and who's ever, there might be lots of people around the state that could do the study to, really look at the methods and what kind of sequestration you might have, what that carbon or carbon equivalent is, and what a farmer ought to be paid as that incentive. So, so that was a great an early victory. It's often very important to start with a study. So it's a good first step, and it'll be important to have that information from the study. And it may be that's as far as we're going to get this year. But we'll see. And we can always, people should always, of course, look at talking to the Senate and trying to find, if you're very interested in this, talk to your senators. We've got quite a few majority senators around here, and it'd be great if they'd have some interest in the bill to, in the actual bill, not the study, but the actual bill to do this. And once we got the study, then we could make it all happen. So Assemblywoman Barrett just said that we're eager to hear from farmers and environmentalists like you with suggestions for ways that these incentives can be designed. Already, she's heard feedback about how to make the financial benefit apply even when farmers do not claim income from farming in a given year. And these are the kind of things we need to hear from people like you who've taken the time to participate and advocate for causes like this. And I guess your interest in this is really critical to moving this issue forward. So that's what she asked me to say to you. And also, I was asked to announce, and maybe someone else was going to do this as well, but I'll say it. There's also an upcoming event in Albany on Tuesday, the 23rd. It's being organized by Cornell to describe their program that was funded in the budget on soil health. What's the name of it?
Soil Health Initiative.
Soil Health Initiative? Okay. It's on Tuesday morning, I think 10:30 in Albany, and if you want more information about that, I have it with me. I have some flyers and information, and I also have Assemblywoman Barrett's business cards, and if anyone wants to get in touch with her directly for feedback about this bill, I'm sure she'd be very happy to hear from you. I'm very happy to hear from you, and I can certainly relay things also to Dee Barrett. So that's it. Thank you all very much for your interest, and I'm happy to take questions at some point. So Miranda says questions now if you have them. Yes.
Hi, Steve Barber from Rochester Institute of Technology. So what do you think the price would be for the carbon? Or how would you perhaps index for maybe the European price? Or legislators are generalists by definition, as the great Barbara Conable once said, congressman from the Rochester area. You might remember Barbara Conable. And so I'm not an expert in this stuff. I listen to the scientists, and we try to help, do policy, get the money out for studies and figure out. I'm a co-sponsor on a carbon tax bill, Cahill-Lifton bill, to say, let's figure that out. But we do the general language in legislation, and then we hand it off to the agency that has the expertise, and if they don't have the expertise, they have the ability to contract out for the expertise and start getting some hard numbers on these things. So I have no idea. Yeah, so maybe linking it to the index, or an existing index or carbon price index. Maybe that would be a good thing.
I can imagine it might. That's a discussion with you and your colleagues. And again, I try to sort out the science, and it's not an easy thing to do necessarily, right? I've listened very closely to the scientists like Bob Howarth on climate change, and then you get the blowback from people, that, oh no, this is wrong, this is wildly, And I say, well, now I'm seeing 4 or 5 other studies, one from Harvard, one from NOAA, one from IPCC. I'm starting to think this is stuff we ought to pay attention to. So I just try to track and see what the consensus of opinion is. And frankly, this is an issue on which we have to take the most conservative approach, right? We have to assume the worst. That, I'm going to listen to the scientists who say, we probably have a very serious problem here that we need to tackle as strongly as possible, as soon as possible. And that's sort of what I'm reading from all the major thinkers in this area. So I'm just trying to, again, keep listening to them, and, you know, again, the experts in the agency and the people that they contract out, you know, to, or the reading they, you know, they go out and read, you know, research, and they say, okay, someone's got to make that decision, and at that point, it's the head of the agency, DEC or Ag and Markets, who would be making that decision. The legislature almost never puts a number like that in legislation. Yes.
Hi Barbara, thanks very much for the introduction. My name's John, and some years ago I was involved as an author of a carbon offset methodology for the use of biochar, which has gone through various iterations and still exists. And in that experience I came across an interesting conundrum which I think is relevant to this group. So if you are in the business of making biochar, the carbon offset is created at the moment where the feedstock, whether it's an animal remain or a plant residue or whatever, is turned into biochar, right? That's the moment at which you change the trajectory of that carbon. And so I see an interesting dilemma whereby the person who creates the biochar may be thinking, I've created this carbon sequestration. And the person who uses the biochar on their agricultural land and derives all sorts of benefits, and maybe some additional carbon sequestration, also thinks that they're part of this carbon storage story. And so I think this is going to, with biochar specifically, which is the topic of today's meeting, I think there's a really interesting question around who owns the carbon rights when that biomass changes its trajectory from returning to the atmosphere and becomes carbon. I think it's really important for us to understand that, because
anyone who participates in making that happen.
Exactly.
It's not just one actor in that. I hear your point, and I'm sure, I know Johannes has thought about those issues, and no doubt other people. So hopefully part of the discussion today and ongoing. I hear you. I hear you. And so that's feedback in the email. If people just zip off an email, you don't have to take a lot of time. You don't have to, you want to attach a couple papers, that's great, to me, to the sponsor of this bill. And we'll get it through to our central staff, to the committee chair, Engelbright at ENCON, McGee at Ag and Markets. We'll get them to the chairs. They have expert central staff, and the Assembly central staff, we have experts. And again, they'll share it, and we'll just keep trying to figure this out as soon as we can. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, what would be the restrictions on a farmer if he took the money to do this?
Yeah, good question. I mean, these are, again, the kind of things that,
Would he be
the agency...
on what he can do with his land?
Well, they'd have to be, you'd have to have some sort of agreement, I'm sure, to have, some sort of legal agreement that I'm going to do this, and I have done this or do this. I assume there'd be some sort of oversight from the agency that would have the ability to come out, government's audit, right? The money they spend has to be shown to be spent properly. So I would think when Ag and Markets or DEC, I would think they'd be working closely with Ag and Markets on this, works on figuring this out. They'd have to say, the farmer will have to do this, this, and this, and that'll be part of the decision making from the agency does all this regulation. And keep in mind, they do the regulation, they do draft regulations, draft regs we call them very often, and those go out for public comment. And just like we did on fracking, we had 3 rounds of public comments, right, that went on for years.
There's no rules yet on the past.
No, we haven't even passed this, we haven't even done law on this yet.
Yeah,
we're at the first
that,
stage.
yeah.
So the agency isn't even involved yet.
I was wondering what they're trying to get at. Like Pennsylvania has that green, you could set your land aside and not build on it.
Yeah, we've got that too.
1/3 taxes you only pay.
Right, we've got farmland preservation law as well.
I wonder if that's what you're looking to do.
No,
Restrict pipelines from coming through. I had
no, it's not just about farmland protection and putting the farmland aside.
Okay.
We have that too. We have development right issues around farmland development rights, and we have farmland protection laws and money to help farmers do that, to prevent development. That's been ongoing for quite a while. It's underfunded, an area that's underfunded.
So this doesn't.
But this is about a more proactive approach
Not
if you
trying
will,
restrict the farmer from
to
doing
change
anything
farming
else.
methods.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there a number or a
Yes.
tracking?
Sure. Well, yes, the bill number, the Carbon Farming Act it's called, is Assembly Bill, that's A 3281. And so you can just go to the just Google New York State Assembly. You'll see a very easy, quick thing where you can do a number search or a keyword search. If you forget that number, you just do carbon farming and as a keyword search, and up it'll pop.
Okay.
And you're able to go, you'll be able to do the actions on it and see, you can see the text of the bill, the sponsor's memo, everything, and what's happened with the bill.
Great.
Yeah. And you can always call the sponsor's office or my office, and my staff is happy to check on those things too. Yeah.
Again, just say briefly to the farmer's question, I mean, this bill you would characterize as positive incentives for
Yes,
farmers
it's
rather
carrots.
than handcuffs or restrictions
Right.
for farmers.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But again, I'm sure there will be some regulations about how it ought to work. The state's not going to pay for whatever you feel like doing. They'll pay if you're able to do things that actually do sequester carbon.
In the long term, medium term.
Well, as soon as you make an agreement that you're going to do that, I would assume you have to be doing that. But
That's why we need the next.
although it
speaker.
doesn't happen instantaneously, obviously there's a process. But anyway, so I'm available. Anyone's welcome to email or call my office if they want to talk to me further about this. And thank you for the opportunity to chat.
Thank you.
Miranda, 1 second. I have a copy of the proposed bill here if anybody wants to take a look at it, so.
And Barbara will be here for the next few
Several
hours. Yeah. So thank you so much, Barbara, for helping us understand this bill, and to Assemblywoman Barrett for introducing it, and to New York State for funding. It was $50,000 for studying what incentives work best for carbon farming. They're going to be looking at what has worked well elsewhere. Should it be tax credits? Should it be rebates? What kinds of incentives work? And so really, really grateful to New York State for funding that. Thank you so much. So I'm Miranda. I'm a volunteer with a local group called Citizens Climate Lobby. We have members across the political spectrum. We're nonpartisan. And our aim is to facilitate partnerships between citizens and legislators for better policy outcomes. In particular, to help produce climate policy with bipartisan appeal, a really nonpartisan appeal. And so I'm here to suggest that there are there's a key role for you as citizens in making these carbon farming incentives happen. It's not enough for us to think they're great. We have to, so my business is building political will, engaging you to help build political will. And so the role that citizens need to play in this is I think, best illustrated by a conversation I recently had with someone who sits on 2 New York State ag committees. She's on Gillibrand's ag committee and Stefanik's ag committee. And I said, I want to know what you think of this carbon farming bill. And she said, well, carbon farming sounds great, and paying farmers to do this sounds great, but where's the funding going to come from? She said, I can tell you from being 20 years working with legislators, that's the thing that legislators are going to be asking first. So this conversation tells me that you can help in 2 key ways. Number one, given that the state's budget is tight, state budgets are even more tight now that federal government is taking money away from state budgets. Given that the state budget is tight, we need to actively work to convince our legislators that to prioritize carbon farming incentives. And number 2, we need to weigh in, what should those incentives look like? Do you want tax credits? Do you want rebates? Do you want something else? The more information that they get from you, the better the outcomes. And where should that money come from? How should New York State fund these incentives? Because it's all of our money. How do we want it spent, right? So as I said, at a time when budgets are tight, these incentives and their funding can't happen unless they have clear public support. And I know you likely didn't come here today with the intention of doing anything political. If you'd rather just learn about carbon farming, that is totally fine. It's a huge benefit to you, your land, and to climate for you to adopt these farming practices. But if you'd like to additionally help create political will for carbon farming to happen more broadly, I'm here to tell you about a few ways you can help. And all the resources you need for this are under your chair. Please don't reach for them yet until I've explained what they are. So number one, you'll find there's a little green card under your chair. You can write to thank Dee Dee Barrett, the original sponsor of this bill. And on it, you can say, why are incentives for carbon farming important to you? And if she hears from a group like this, you guys represent, you're from all over New York State and even Canada, you're a wide variety of stakeholders. That's gold to her. Right? If she hears from you, she can take that stack and she can go to her colleagues and say, this is why we need to pass this bill. Because a wide variety of, of folks think this is important, and here's why. So that's the green card under your chair. Also, it's really important for your own assembly member and your senators as well to hear why this is important to you. If you're anything like me, after you leave today, you're going to completely forget that somebody asked you to call your legislator. If you would like to be reminded to call your legislator, we are in the business of trying to make this as easy for you as possible. This will be coming around, and you can circle, you put your name and your phone number and circle, remind me to call my legislators. Yeah. That's thing number two you can do. And that's huge because your legislators care most to hear from their constituents. And if they hear from you, that's a big deal. Also on this sheet here is a third way you can help. Barbara Lifton mentioned that on Tuesday there is a roundtable happening in Albany to talk about Cornell's new initiative, the soil health initiative. They got money from the state to further the science on what should the soil, what are best soil practices, but also they got money to help create a soil health network so that we can keep learning from each other. That's huge. And I know most of us don't have the time perhaps to visit Albany on Tuesday in the middle of a day and to hear from them directly, what is this soil health network, and but perhaps you're curious. And if you'd like information about it, you can circle here, send me info about Cornell's soil health initiative and network, and we'll send that to you. That's thing number three you can do. And thing number four, on the blue card under your chair is the following. So the financing for this bill has not yet been decided. You mentioned tax credits, but as Dee Dee Barrett said, because they got feedback right away from, actually through us, saying, you know what, farmers don't like the idea of tax credits, certainly not tax credits that are non-refundable. If they don't make income in a particular year, they're not going to qualify for these tax credits. How useful is that to them? So it should either be a refundable tax credit, or it should be a rebate, or it should be something else. So they need to hear from you. And my point is that this is all flexible still, and your feedback can make a big difference. So on the blue card under your chair, you can indicate whether you would be willing to be contacted to have a short conversation with me or somebody else, sharing your opinions on what should those incentives look like, and also, importantly, how should New York State fund this stuff, right? So that New York State doesn't get pushback when you say, hey, are you taking this out of my tax dollars? I didn't want this. They need to know that you want this and how you want it. So for those who wish, and you don't need to, we're going to take the next couple of minutes to fill out what's under your chair or circle on this clipboard, and then I'll wrap up with like 1 more minute of remarks after you've taken those 5 minutes. So I'm going to send this around. Under your chair are blue and green cards if you like, and otherwise you can chat with your neighbors. Yeah.
So, bravo, this is fantastic. I would just make one suggestion.
Yeah.
I would not frame this as getting political. I would frame this as just basic civic engagement. If you want to get political and go, Republican versus Democrat, that's different than substantive input to policymakers on substantive policy changes.
Thank you. Okay, civic engagement, therefore, please do it. card. Are we asking for your opinion yet on these incentives? What should they look like? No, we're asking you to tell us if you're willing to be contacted to have a conversation, to share your opinions by phone later. And Kathleen has told me that we are short on time, so what I'm going to ask is, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm going to ask that you please make a point of getting these to me sometime during the day. I'm here all day, but we don't have the time to fill them out fully now, but the clipboard will continue to go around. And the other thing I want to say is that, actually, Barbara, I'm sorry, I cut you off. As I said, so this is 30 seconds more, and then I'll pass the torch. I'm with this local nonpartisan group, Citizens Climate Lobby, members across the political spectrum, and I would invite you to chat with me at lunch if you're interested in the following. I'm happy to give you examples of where these citizen and legislative partnerships have worked incredibly well, producing climate policy and partnerships that are nonpartisan and productive and appealing across the political spectrum. If you'd like to meet me at lunch, I can tell you about how our New York State legislators in particular, Reed, Faso, Stefanik, Katko, King, Zeldin, Donovan, have partnered with citizens to produce, on the subject of climate adaptation and mitigation. It's really exciting stuff. If that interests, come find me at lunch. Thank you.